Hello, let me help you start with MPS. When you start MPS the first time, you'll see a welcome screen. On this screen, you can create a new project, open an existing MPS project, or open one of the sample projects that come bundled with MPS. So let's try this one, because this is typically a very good place to start exploring MPS if you know nothing about it. MPS comes with numerous sample projects which you can open. I think the Robot Kaya sample is a very good project to start with. Numerous educational resources that we created for JetBrains MPS are built around this project. So you select the project, or you select the folder and open it in MPS. Now when the project opens, you'll see an empty MPS screen. There are a few hints here in the middle of the screen, and we'll follow the first hint here right away. Project view with Command 1 or Alt 1, or if you're on Windows or Linux. That keyboard shortcut pops up a project structure view, a window that shows you the structure of your project. Now, if you're not a keyboard fan, or if you need some time to learn the keyboard shortcuts, maybe you could consider clicking this button in the bottom left corner, which will make tool buttons permanently visible. So now you can use mouse to slide in and hide tool windows that MPS positions all around the screen. These windows typically contain some additional information that you need for working with your project, but ultimately, the place in the middle is dedicated to the editor, the place where you write or read your code. The structure view on the left-hand side is very important, because here you see your complete project and you can configure it. If I right-click on the topmost node, which represents the project, I can invoke actions like rebuild or make of the whole project. I could rename it. I could run a model checker to check whether there are any compile time errors in my code. Or I could configure project path, which is the place where you can add or remove modules from your project. Currently, this project consists of 5 modules. And we can actually see them here, these 5 modules. These two modules are called solutions. They're displayed with with an icon with a little S character in it, indicating that the name of these modules is solutions. So these are places where code resides. So this is where you create code. These yellow modules are languages. So these contain definition of languages that you can then use in solutions to write code. Inside modules, on a more fine-grained level, models are used to organize code. So this is an example of a model. In a module of kind solution, there's a model. And model, you can think of model as a Java package or a folder in Ruby. And you can create multiple models inside a module, and you can nest them hierarchically one in another, just like you can do with Java packages, for example. And these models then hold the actual code. The code here, these 4 elements you see, these are called root nodes. They already represent code, and they represent the root of a tree. In MPS terminology, all code is abstract syntax tree, and so these trees consist of nodes, and nodes that have no parent are called root nodes, and these can be created on the model level. So model is then the parent of these root nodes. And we can actually make the whole abstract syntax tree visible right here in the structure window. If I show members, now I can click on this Java class and see it has a a property name, and it has children for enums. Similarly, I could click on another root node and see that it's a root of a whole tree of elements. But typically, you don't need to see the members in here. There are better ways to visualize abstract syntax tree and work with code on the tree level. Now, if we look at languages, the module that represents a language also consists of models. These models, however, have special meaning. In a language definition, each model represents a particular aspect of language definition. In a structure, we define the abstract syntax, the objects, or as we call them, concepts, out of which you build the code, the abstract syntax tree. So things like if statement, a while loop, a repeat statement. You know, these things, when you talk about code on an abstract level, these are captured in the structure. In the editor, the actual notation is displayed, is defined. So the way the particular concepts are displayed on the screen, like an if statement has an editor, so that on the screen the user will interact with code in this way. So there will be a few keywords like if, do, and, else, which is visible optionally. And then the placeholders, or the cells that represent the that represent children of the node, like condition and true branch and false branch, where the user is able to interact with these children of the if statement. And there are a few more concepts. There are a few more aspects defined in the particular models. One exception, though, is the generator. Generator is a full-blown module, just like language or solution. So generator is also a module which has its own models, one or more, but it is nested inside language, because in MPS generators belong to language that they generate, so they are nested visually inside the module, even though a generator is a module of its own right. In most MPS projects, you will find language definitions and then at least one solution, typically called Sandbox, which serves the purpose of playing and experimenting with the language that you're designing. So when you have a language design project in MPS, you typically have a language and a sandbox project where you play with the language. So when you click something from the sandbox model, you get it open in the editor, and now you effectively using the languages. Well, what language is? Well, you can always open the properties of a model, and there you see the languages that you can use in this particular model. So this model can use these 3 languages, which happen to be the languages I designed in this project, but they don't have to. I mean, these can be languages that come bundled with MPS, for example. So if I click plus, I see a whole bunch of languages that come bundled with MPS, and I can choose whichever of those I want to use. Or when you install a plugin, then the languages that the plugin installs will also be available for import in your model. On the Dependencies tab, this is where you define dependencies between models. This is just like imports in Java or any other language. So when your code here, the robot code in this particular example, wants to refer to robot code defined in some other models. If I had more models, I could add dependencies here. So I could add dependency on some other models, and then my code here would see the code from there. So if I, for example, create a new model in my Sandbox module, I give it a name, I import the robot language, so, and in this And if in this new model I create a new library, and in that library now I create a routine foo for the robot, so the robot now knows how to do foo. Foo means whatever, maybe make 2 steps forward. Now if I want to call it from a script like sample, here's some script in which I would like to call my foo routine defined here in this my library. Now when I want to use the library, I see all libraries, but only in the current model, in the Sandbox model. I see common, filling, and playground definition. They are all defined here. But in another model, I don't have it available in the completion menu. And when I type my library, nothing's there. In MPS uses projectional editor, so the code has to be resolved early on. If you see code like this in red, and when you do control space the menu is empty, this is a situation where the IDE has no clue what you're trying to achieve. And unlike in text-based editors, here it will not help if you type more, hoping that at some point there will be just enough information for the IDE to parse it and understand. Here you have to resolve things immediately. And if things are in red and completion menu is empty, you're either typing something wrong, you mistype a character somewhere, or you're trying to insert a reference to something that hasn't been imported. So there's no dependency between the 2 models, between Sandbox and the another model. So that's why I can't use stuff from this model in this model. I have to insert a dependency. To insert a dependency, I right-click on Sandbox, go to Model Properties, and to the Dependencies tab. Remember, the Used Languages tab is the place where you define what syntaxes, what languages you want to use in this model. And in Dependencies, you express the imports, the models that you need to depend on. So we add another one model, as soon as we do that, we can now do control space and it will resolve correctly to my new library. And when I do control space on an empty field, my new library is there. It becomes visible. So now I can use it. You definitely need to be aware of model properties and the ability to set dependencies and used languages. Now, when I close the project, I get back to the welcome screen. This time the project is listed here among the recently opened projects. Now, before we finish, I want to show you how to create a new project, because that's what you'll be doing, I'm pretty sure. So when you hit the Create New Project link here, you've got a wizard, and the wizard gives you 3 options. Either create an empty project, and you set the name and location of it, and you get an empty project, exactly as the wizard promised. So now you have to create stuff yourself. So you can go New, and now you pick either solution or language or a dev kit. Well, I haven't mentioned dev kits yet. Well, dev kits are collections of other modules for easy reference. So don't worry too much about dev kits. They're just collections of languages and solutions that you attach to grip them so that you can refer to them easily. If you want to set a dependency, instead of setting dependency on 5 different languages and 3 solutions, you just set a dependency on 1 dev kit. If you create a new solution, you give it a name, and then inside solutions you then create new models. The model name should start with the name of the solution, and then you give it name, and you set the languages you want to use, like for example base language, which is Java implemented in MPS. So when you import base language, you're able to type Java in your solution. When you add the core.xml language, you'll be able to create XML documents. In the dependencies tab, you can express dependencies on particular models, but there are none in this project, so I will add no. So now I've got a new model. I can right click and go new, and now either create something from base language or from XML. If I create new class, now I can give it a name and start typing. Similarly, I could create an XML document. Now, typing attributes in XML in this particular language is not very convenient, but once it works perfectly if you know how to do that. So I'm just showing you in case you want to type some XML. Simply type space and then name of the attribute followed by equals, and here's your attribute. Okay, you could also create a new language. So it creates an empty language with a few aspect models created and an empty generator. You could add more aspects, because not all aspects are created automatically, but you can always right click on a language and create a new aspect for refactorings, intentions, and others. Now, the language here is not automatically imported into the solution here. So you would have to go in your model properties, use languages, and add new language before you're able to use your new language in your solution. But the language is empty, so the language doesn't really give us any syntax we could leverage in the solution here. So that was starting an empty project. If I close this project, and create a new one, this solution option in the wizard, it gives you a project with one solution in it. So typically a project where you don't want to define a language, you just want to use it. So this gives you a shorthand. But the most typical scenario when creating a new project is picking language project. You give the project a name, location, you name your language, and possibly you check the Sandbox solution stuff so that you'll also have a solution configured so that you can use your language right away. So this, now we get a project with two modules. One is a language, one is a solution, and the language is empty as well as the just like the Sandbox is. And when I create a very simple language element in my cool language, I right click on structure, pick new concept. So now I can create a concept that I could use in my language. Each language, if it's a standalone language, should have at least one rootable concept. So a concept that you can create in the model so that the user can then click in the Sandbox, go new, and create something. Something like class or interface in Java or file in XML language. So something of that sort. So we could create something like properties here. So a concept, we'll call it properties. We'll implement the I-named concept so that the properties file or the properties concept can have a name. And then we can create another concept called property. Each property has a name and also has a value. And now in properties, we'll hold, in the properties file, we'll hold properties, which will be a collection of properties 0 to n. So we've got a very simple language for modeling properties. Right? The root of it is properties, and it can be a root, so we can create it on a model level. Property file has a name. Maybe we can call it property file. You see, renaming stuff is very easy. Just change the name. So we'll call it property file. It has a name and holds collection of properties and property. is also a thing that has a name and a value. Now notice this generation required message. That means the language has been changed but not regenerated. So we can't use it. If I now right click in Sandbox, there's still no new property file there. I have to rebuild my language first, and I do it by right clicking on that language, but there are several ways to do that. And now in my Sandbox I can go new property file, and here's my property file. I'll give it a name, and now I'll start creating properties. And so on. One last thing you need to know. Settings. Now when you go to the settings, which on Mac are named preferences, on Windows, Linux, you go to the file menu and you search for settings or project settings. It is a dialog where you can configure various aspects of MPS. The search box in the upper left corner is activated immediately as soon as you open the window, so you can then type in whatever you're looking for, like plugins, and then you see the plugins configuration. All the plugins that are available in your system, you can activate or deactivate them. Then you can install plugins from JetBrains or plugins from other repositories, and after restart those will be available in MPS. If they come with extra languages, those languages will be then ready to be used in your solutions. You might also configure the generator, where there are a lot of useful options to set, or the editor, like font size, font style, and various aspects of how the editor works. In the key map sections, you can configure the key shortcuts used to activate various actions. You can search for commands, or you can search for actions, and then add or remove shortcuts to them so that you can customize the way MPS works. There are several predefined templates up here, and you can choose maybe one of them will fit you best. Okay, so that was a quick tour around MPS. Hopefully you enjoyed this and learned something new. Goodbye.